Well, today we're going to look at a couple of important things in glass blowing. We're going to look at a basic glass blowing process that you haven't seen yet in class. We're going to alter the shape of the vessel a lot on the punty as opposed to altering it a little bit. And we're also going to look at a couple of basic ways of handling cane. So, we'll look at two different ways of picking up canes. We'll look at picking up canes out of the optic mold or dip mold. That's not a Venetian technique. What is a Venetian technique is to pick up canes off of a plate. In this case, ceramic. In Venice, usually iron. Thus the name ferro, F-E-R-R-O. But first we're going to look at some glass blowing issues. And we're going to focus on plates today, plates and platters. A platter is a big plate. A charger is a kind of big plate. So plate is the best term I can think of. And to set up a plate, it's kind of different than anything else. Now, a plate or a platter that has this profile is what you get when you blow a bubble, make it as oblate a spheroid as possible, punty it, and open it. You get something like this, and then when you spin it open, you get something like this. Well, a lot of plates and platters look better when there's less of this, when there's more well and less of this. So what do you do if you want a really big well and little short sides? Well, that's where this unique setup comes in. So what you do is this. You set it up with, again, as oblate a spheroid as possible, like that. You don't flatten the bottom. You do attach the punty with it like this. And then where we normally set the bottom angle on the blowpipe, we set the bottom angle on the punty. And we do it with the wood jacks or parchofis. And we go in and we push downward to broaden the base so that we wind up with a bubble that looks like this. And then when you flip out the sides, it looks like this. And when you flip it out, you wind up with these very short shoulders like that. So let me show you the principle by which you do that. I'm just going to gather clear glass, set it up, and do it real quickly so you see it without the canes. I'm going to gather from the big furnace, and I'm going to use the coating gather and collecting gather process to get as much glass as I can really quickly. Here's my coating gather. I'm going to let that stiffen up a little bit. Here's the collecting gather. I like to shape the glass in the air using gravity before I marver. I blow gently to blow the glass out of the hole in the end of the pipe. During marvering, it always gets filled up with glass. Blow that out, remarver, blow and cap at a medium pressure. And what we're doing is making the standard setup. 3/4 bubble, 1/4 solid tip. I marver the tip to make it pointed and to make it cool. This is a way of isolating a thick spot for the punty to sit on. And I'm going to do this like any Venetian would do. I'm going to blow a sphere, put a neck in it, then re-soften the sphere and turn it from spherical into an oblate spheroid. That's roughly the shape of the Earth. I'm over the tip again to make sure that this stays chilly and thick. Blow halfway to final size. I start the neck. I'll blow it up a little bigger, then finish the neck. It's essential, whatever you're making, whatever the decoration, it's essential to make a really good skinny neck, small diameter neck with tapering concave shoulders. The skinny neck will break easily. The concave shoulders are utterly resistant to thermal shock. So when you transfer it to the punty and do that first reheat, it'll never crack. If the shoulders are convex, it'll crack every other time. So I have my necked sphere. I'm going to reheat the sphere and alter its shape. I cover the hole in the pipe and hold it up, and I'll do this about 3 more times. This is the way any Venetian glassblower starts a low bowl or a plate, for example. I'm going to blow a teeny bit. And I'll make sure that's nice and straight. I'm going to cool the punty sight. I put the punty in a few moments ago. I'll flash and transfer to the punty. Notice that I haven't touched the sides to make a little bit of cylinder. I haven't flattened the bottom with a sharp edge there. I let the bottom become fairly flat, but I didn't flatten it per se. Here we go to the punty. It's a little bit off center. So now I've flashed it. If I touch it with the pincers to push it onto center, it won't possibly crack it. So I push downward, and I'm looking at the profile to make it centered. There we go. It's pretty good. I reheat and open to about, 1.5 inches or so. When you make a low form, you can't use the soffietta twice as we've been doing with tumblers and goblet tops. But that's because if you use it a second time and open it more, the tip of the soffietta will touch bottom and you won't make a seal and you can't use the soffietta. So you use the soffietta once, you make it count by opening the hole a little extra big, about 1.5 inches. I'm going to use the soffietta to make this shoulder a little shorter. plates almost always have a folded edge when they're handmade. So I'm going to do an inner fold here. I'm not sure that the edge touched the inside, so I'm going to reheat it and do that one more time. It's essential that the edge touch the inner wall. Otherwise, it'll open up during the process of finishing the plate. There we go. Now, I'm going to use the wood jacks to expand the edge at the base and increase the diameter. In doing so, by the way, I'll push in a little bit to the left and I'll make sure that the bottom stays flat. Here goes. I do a little bit at a time. You always want to dip the wood jacks in water each time you use them. It makes them much slicker. And so what's happening is the diameter is increasing, the bottom is flattening, and I wind up with these very low sides. And you can see that when I spin this open, it's going to have a really big well and very short shoulders. And I'm going to spin it open with centripetal force. And I can fine-tune the profile in these last moments that it's soft. So, big well, little shoulders. I'll put that in the annealer. So that's the way you make something with very low shoulders, or you make a plate with very short shoulders. Now, next, let's look at canes. Most of you have probably seen people pick up canes on a plate, so I'm going to do that second. First, I'm going to pick up canes out of an optic mold or a dip mold, and this has become a little bit unusual in this country now. 20, 30 years ago, this was the way most people picked up canes, but things have changed. So what I've got in here are two optic molds. You can stand up and see them. Two optic molds. One is lined with 20 canes, the other with 10 canes. They're heated to about 800 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to go gather, and I'm going to pick those up on a bubble. One of the advantages of this process is that it is incredibly fast. Now, I note that it's about 11:15. Let's see how long this takes. I'll set this up with a number 6 block. And I hold it up so that the bubble blows to the tip. When I use a dip mold or optic mold, I don't want a thick tip. I do want it tapered, roughly the taper of the mold. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I'm going to put my blow hose on. And into the mold. First thing I do is I make the canes stick to the uppermost part of the bubble, then to the lowermost part. The next thing is I get it soft and I transform it to a cylinder, mostly by reducing the diameter of the shoulder. There, my canes are nice. It's good and cylindrical. I need to bring all the canes together at the tip. So I'm going to marver one more time and then about an inch from the tip make a constriction to bring all of the canes together at one point. I'll begin twisting the canes by marvering in place. And now, when I sit down, I'll make another constriction near the tail and twist. Now the glass blowing really begins. I'll blow it a little bigger and begin to make it not so much a sphere, but an oblate spheroid. Again, this will be a plate. There's my preliminary neck. I'm going to blow it up a little bigger. Pushing into the left while I inflate it. Here I'm again with the very short oblate spheroid. Get that on center, make sure the neck is really sharp and well articulated so it'll break easily. Make sure the bottom is centered. I'll cool at the punty site. And transfer to the punty. It's very important to keep things well centered when you're doing low, short things, especially a plate. Any off-centeredness really snowballs quickly, so you have to catch it early and fix it. What I'm doing is my first reheat after the transfer to the punty. Like I said before, I can only use the Soffietta once because it's a low shape. And to make it count, I'm going to open the hole to about 1.5 inches in diameter. You saw the inner fold before. Here I'll do an outer fold. I use the Soffietta to make it a little bigger. I'm going to let the thin glass cool. Now the only thing soft is the thick glass. I'll blow a second at a time, and it blows the lip area a little thinner. And here comes the external or outer fold. This is quite a bit more trouble, more difficult than an inner fold. An inner fold is relatively easy. You push the edge in and lift. You just saw that. The outer fold requires a little more manipulation. The advantage of the outer fold on a plate is that it puts the groove on the lower side of the plate, so it's less likely to trap debris. Like I said before, I have to make sure that that's touching, that the edge is touching the inside of the vessel all the way around, or it will open helter-skelter later on. So I have to squeeze the join right there, make sure they're stuck together. And now I can go to the plate maneuver. Most of the work I've been doing now has been on the rim, so the rim is hot. But the part I want to shape right now isn't. What I want to shape is way down here. This is all soft. To get this hot without overheating that, I'm going to use what I call the heat treatment. I'm going to heat for maybe 5-6 seconds deep in the furnace, come out, let the edge, which is real hot, cool off a little bit, and I'll do that 3 or 4 times. And that's a really good way to get everything soft without overheating the thinnest and the hottest parts. Do that one more time and then do the base broadening move. I push into the left to flatten the bottom. This is my last chance to fine-tune the shape of the bottom. I'll do that one more time. No, it looks good. So now I just heat the edge and spin it open. And there's a plate with a very low, a very big well, and a very small edge. And that changing the shape on the punty, broadening the base on the punty, is really the only way to get a shape like this. Any questions about that? Any questions at all? Yeah. Oh, okay. Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Now, we're at the halfway mark. This is my first webcast of the summer of 2014. I'm going to do another one in August. So what I'll do is the first half of the Reticello now, I'll save the cup, and I'll do the rest of the Reticello process in the second webcast. So let me show you the process rather thoroughly of picking up canes on a collar and making the cup for Reticello. That'll leave us with a little time so we can do a question and answer session for the end. I may show you a couple of other things like a lid, but we're going to show the front end of the Reticello now, and the completion will be in about 6 weeks. In this pickup box is a little holder. It's made of something like vermiculite, and it's got a concave little cavity there. I'm going to make the cup, put it in the pickup oven upright, and then that will give me access to, in 6 weeks, lower the insert and do the inner part. So here is, by the way, the thing called the pastorelli. A lot of people call this the pastorelli. This is actually the ferro, F-E-R-R-O. It means iron in Italian. These are traditionally made of metal, usually mild steel these days. I much prefer ceramic. I've measured this, set the calipers for the proper 3.14 ratio for the collar I'm about to make. And I'll pick these up on a collar on the end of a blowpipe. But first I'm going to preheat the canes. One of the great advantages of a ceramic plate is it doesn't spall and shed metal. You'd never do this over a pot of glass with an iron plate because they pop off rust. But the pastorelli, this thing, the handle, is stainless, the plate is ceramic, so there's no problem putting it above a pot of glass. I just want to take the chill off this. These are canes with a particularly thick coating of clear on the outside. Reticello is traditionally done with a very thin thread of white glass and a thicker coating of clear glass than you would normally have. So here's the blowpipe. Sorry. I'm going to make the collar this diameter. You may be noticing that I'm working solo. This is not the norm. I've worked solo since 1979 when I started furnace work. I grew up lamp working or flame working, and I suppose I just have a natural preference for working solo like a flame worker does. At any rate, normally this business of picking up the canes and doing this setup, this is normally done with a couple of people. That's just my truth in advertising disclaimer. Reticello happens to be, if you have a pickup oven, happens to be very, very manageable solo. Picking up canes on a collar, as you'll see, is very manageable. It's not that difficult. So the collar is about the right diameter. I'm going to let it stiffen up a little. I'll put the collar on hold here at the mouth of the furnace. This area to the right of the mouth of the furnace acts as a garage, and it keeps things just about hot enough not to crack. My setup here is such that all of the pipes and punties are right here. I can do my housekeeping while I'm doing other things. I'll give the post a flash. This furnace has a wonderfully even interior in terms of heat. Most glory holes are a lot hotter toward the back than the front, so you'll very often see people doing this procedure flip the plate around. At this point, they'll pick it up and turn it around. It's actually not necessary in this furnace because it's very even, but that's the reason people do that. I'll just squeeze these together a little bit. I prefer to heat the canes gradually and to soften them and get them soft throughout. You can heat them very quickly, fry the surface, stick them together, but when you pick them up, if there are little gaps, it's very hard to close them. If everything is evenly heated, it's much easier if something goes wrong. So I prefer 3 or 4 reheats to let the heat soak into the white core. Any questions, just put up your hand. Happy to, yes? It's good when you pick up the canes. I think it's good to have the canes really hot and the collar tepid. That way you have the stability of the collar being firm, and you can manipulate the canes more easily. I'm going to take this end piece off. Those are often called the quarretti. And once I asked Johnny Toso what quarretti means, and he first said, I don't know. And then he said, it means little rectangular thing. And I can probably take the near one off. I want to make sure that that cane is stuck. It is. So we're about ready for the roll-up. Roll-up. That's a term that you hear in studio glass, and there is this mistaken concept that the roll-up was invented in Australia. Well, what I'm about to do dates from Renaissance Venice, from the middle of the 16th century. What the Australians brilliantly came up with was the idea of making this post out of cullet so that you can actually do this whole procedure without a furnace. You just use cullet. You know, I think I'm going to stick these together one more time. You make the collar out of cullet so you don't actually have to have a pot of molten glass. That's what I would call a roll-up. It's kind of a brilliant idea. And here comes the roll-up. With the roll-up, there's usually either a gap or an overlap. There's a gap. I touch them together at the end just to stabilize them. There's always a little kiln wash on the surface of the cane, so you have to brush that off. I'm going to do that right now. And now I deal with the gap. going to use the heat treatment to soften the post a little bit without having the canes begin to collapse. This is all just to close up the gap. That was, I must confess, a little bit of a generous gap. But it doesn't mean it's over at all. In some ways, a gap is easier to deal with than the alternative, which is a big overlap. At any rate, just about closed now. And now the gap is closed. I'm going to reheat Marver to make this nice and round. Beginning to close the end. I've been doing reticello since about 1983. And I've been saving those little flowers all these years. Someday I'm going to come up with a brilliant idea of what to do with them. I haven't yet. Now I'm going to restore the roundness, and I'm going to begin the twist. Again, this is going to be the cup for a reticello project. And now I'll make it round and begin the twist on the marver. I'm going to dip the tip in water to stiffen the glass. That way I can grab it and exert the torque on the upper part of the vessel. I have to put a neck in. This neck, of course, is going to be the bottom of the cup. It's going to be the opening at the bottom of the cup. Now I create a hole in the top of the cup. Oh, Dan, move your right foot, please. Would you get that? Quick, quick. Right foot, right by his right foot. That's it, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well done. This is a normal opening procedure. I open the hole to 1 inch. There's the cup. The last thing I do is I get everything slightly soft and I rub on it from the outside with the jacks. And that's so that the ridges will be most prominent on the interior of the cup. That's one of the things that's going to help contribute to the bubbles that form when I lower the insert and blow. I want the roughness to be on the inside, not the outside. I'll be grabbing this from the edge with the pincers, and I don't want it to crack, so I'm going to preheat the pincers. And here it goes. The cup goes into the pickup box. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. I'm sorry. Forgot to do one thing. I like to bite the neck with the diamond shears just before I do this. There we go. There's the cup ready for the insert. Any questions about what you've seen? Yes?
How do you make sure that your next twist is twisted at the same angle?
Haha. Oh, at the same angle. You eyeball it. You eyeball it. I like a twist that from the front is roughly 45 degrees. Now, Venetians like a super tight twist, so they tend to twist much more tightly. And they'll have, again, viewing the vessel from there, they'll have a twist like that. You have to twist and twist and twist and twist to do that. Interestingly, and I didn't notice this until about a year ago, the old Reticello, the Reticello that was made around 1700 in Venice, has very little twist. In fact, some of the finest pieces have a twist that's way less than 45 degrees. The outer part may barely have a twist. The inner part may be a little bit more twisted. But the thing that makes it look so successful is that they have a lot of canes. They use thin canes and a lot of them, so that a platter might have 105 or 110 canes. Here, this pickup was about 60 or 65 canes. So when you have nearly twice as many canes, visually, it's much more spectacular, and you don't have to have the twist that tight. Yes? No, very curiously it's not. Now, the greatest collection of canes, Reticello, in the world happens to be in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's in Rosenborg Castle. In 1708, the King of Denmark made a state visit to Venice and was given a present of 200 of the finest Venetian glasses. He had them sent back, and he bought about 200 more. And he had them sent back to Rosenborg Castle in Copenhagen and a room outfitted with very fancy ornate shelves. And the glass was put in place, and it's been there ever since. It's this incredible time capsule that we historians of the decorative arts of the Renaissance refer to again and again, because it is the best Venetian glass of the time, and it's closely datable. That's a really rare thing. So anyway, it has these great Reticello pieces. And what was the question? Oh yeah, right, what did you say? Same number of canes. So, incredibly, I've been there twice, and I've counted canes. They very kindly take things off display. I've counted canes, and typically they're not the same number of canes. Some of the big platters have 105 on the inside and 110 on the outside. They're different. So it indicates that they made separate pickups for both parts, the exterior and the interior. It's possible to make one pickup, divide it in half, and use half for the inner part and half for the outer part, but you'd of course get the same number of canes there. You also can see flaws that are different in the different parts. Some canes are thicker, some are thinner. You can see patterns, and I think I've obsessed about that quite enough, but let me tell you that I did look really carefully, and it's fascinating that they aren't the same number, usually. What is terribly interesting is that the smaller objects are all cane. The inner surface and the outer surface are the canes that were picked up on the respective collars. On the big pieces, the platters, for example, the innermost area is thinly lined with clear glass, thinly lined. And that was done not by picking up the canes on a bubble, as you might suspect, but rather by a really curious process called the sbrufo process. It sounds like you're having some kind of a sinus attack. Sbrufo, sometimes sbrufetto. And that is a process whereby the second part, the inner part, the liner, when the canes are fused together, it's stood upright, a bubble is lowered in, just like a blown foot, and blown really hard, and it has the effect of lining the inner part with a thin layer of glass. Sbrufo, and I will show that in August. The next part will be lined with this sbrufo or sbrufetto. I can never remember the name, so I carry this little, I don't carry it all the time, but anyway, that's the word, sbrufo or sbrufetto, and that's that thin liner. Very clever invention. But they weren't picked up on a bubble. That starts in the 19th century. This technique you saw of picking up the canes out of a dip mold, that's English, mid-19th century, Curiosities of Glassmaking, written by a guy named Apsley Pellet, 1849, is where that first appears in print, to the best of my knowledge. It's not a Venetian technique, it's an English technique. I think the French also did that. In the 19th century, the Venetians weren't the only people doing cane work. There was a lot going on in England and France as well. Anyway, so you've seen two very different ways of picking up cane, and you've seen that very important principle, pretty much unique to low bowls and plates, of changing the base of a vessel on the punty rather than setting the base on the blowpipe. Completely different process. Are there any last questions? Harry.
Bill, someone online asked if you ever work on the fly, not on a specific sort of piece.
Okay. Okay. I do. The question came from the web. Do I ever work on the fly, just improvise, not from a historical piece? The answer is rarely. I find old glass utterly fascinating, and I'm continually inspired by it. That sounds kind of like a canned response, but it's absolutely true. I'm more interested in the old glass than coming up with new things. So somebody like Lino is particularly impressive to me because he can do all of the old techniques, but over the last 20 years, he's completely gone off the grid and come up with original, amazing new ideas. So both are possible, but for me, I focus on the old glass. Anyway, if you're around in August, come to the webcast. Come here. If you're not, see it on the webcast. So see you in August. Thanks.